So you hear,
Is it like that humming noise in the room? Yeah.
That's what I'm getting.
Oh.
But it's okay.
I don't know what it is.
Well,
I mean, it's probably the heater.
It's probably like the AC unit or whatever, but there's only so much you can do.
Instead of AC unit, you could say like fermenter.
It's the it's the boilers running.
There you go.
Yeah,
You got
to improvise.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, t-shirts have finally all shipped out. I have to say thank you to all those supporters who have supported us through Patreon, and my apologies to those who I know I'm just a little bit behind. I hope it's going to be well worth your wait. I also want to say welcome to all those new Patreon supporters who just joined us in January. This is our first podcast for February, and we're going to be back behind the scenes to see what it really takes to make bourbon happen. Our guest today is one of those unsung heroes. We look forward to bringing you more guests and even more conversation about bourbon in 2017. We're picking up steam after a record-setting month of over 41,000 plays of this podcast. It's pretty awesome, and I think our goal is to hit 50,000 in February. So to keep this show going, please take a minute and support us on Patreon. We've got sponsorships starting at just $1 a month that gets you unedited footage, koozies, and of course we have limited edition t-shirts. So make sure you visit patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Pursuit Podcast. It's just Kenny here tonight, and we are actually doing a tour of Lawrenceburg. So I'm actually over here, and we were tasting some barrels of wild turkey earlier, and I said, you know what, I need to make the most out of this trip. So I'm going to go ahead and send a few emails out. And when I did that, I had a lot of responses back, and I'm so very, very happy. We actually had Woodford Reserve today, and I was trying to find, I said, you know what, it's not going to be good if I have by myself here. So I need to find somebody to come with me. So I had Lyndon responded back, and he said, you know what, I want to be here with you. So anybody that's never heard of Lyndon or never heard of him before, so Lyndon, give us a little background about yourself.
You know, I've lived in Kentucky all my life. I live in Crestwood, Kentucky right now, about 2 miles away from Jefferson's Reserve. And, you know, distilling and bourbon, you know, it's been in my life all, you know, for my 39 years that I've lived on this planet, whether I like it or not. You know, I've lived in areas in the bluegrass region where there's distilleries and toured distilleries. I've done the bourbon chase by distilleries, whether it's Woodford Reserve or Wild Turkey or Jim Beam. So, you know, the bourbon industry is now an integral part of my existence. I love drinking bourbon. I love the history behind our industry, and I couldn't be prouder of where it is today. So,
Well, I mean, what else do you do inside the bourbon call? I mean, you used to work in a bourbon kind of thing.
Sure. So
I've some listeners about that.
My background is in retail, so I've managed, you know, retail, whether it's been Kroger or most recently Liquor Barn. I used to be a manager for Liquor Barn, so I've dealt on the retail side and dealt with you know, the 3-tier distribution system, from, you know, dealing with the distributors all the way up to making sure that we are sound on the retail side, making sure that we're in stock on the products that people want most, make sure that our teams are knowledgeable on products, on taste profiles, on history, you know, where our bourbon is coming from, you know, what mash bills they use. And I think it's so important for us who might meet people who are coming in from different states or different countries to educate on the retail side those who don't really know about the bourbon industry, and make sure that, you know, when they're purchasing and choosing a product from the store, just how much thought and innovation and just genuine thought went behind that product.
So, Lyndon, I guess question for you before we start is, so you were behind the barrel purchasing program to begin with, right? And when it became the time that said, like, okay, we need to buy a barrel. how do you choose the people that actually buy the barrel, right? Like, how do you find the right tasters that are going to be to say, like, we're going to choose the right barrel that are going to be able to be the best palates behind of what we're going to put in front of our consumers?
Sure. Well, everybody has to be different, because if everybody had the same palate, then you would not have the best overall variety of barrels that people would say, okay, that's a great barrel, or no, that's a really horrible barrel. So you need to have a variety of palates. People who taste sweetness, people who taste spice, people who taste proof, people who taste finish, people who have incredible noses to be able to discern, the differences between caramel, vanilla, cedar, oak, all those flavors that go into a particular barrel. And so I think it's so vital that you have a person or a group of people who taste different things. So you end up with the best barrel, or the best single barrel that you can possibly have to ultimately educate your customers when they're coming in your store and saying, okay, we picked this particular barrel out of this particular warehouse, out of this particular rick in the warehouse, and it was this particular proof at this particular age, and it was incredible. And we proofed it down to this 120 proof or this 110 proof, and we only had to add this amount of water to make it what it is, and you will love it. And it would be a great gift. It would be a great, just a great bottle to have in your bar, to sell to your customers and so forth. So I find that just really fascinating.
Good. So I think that's going to play in very well to the guest we have today, as well as to the kind of topic of today, which is just basically just tasting in general, right? And so today we have our guest is today Elizabeth McCall. McCall is the sensory scientist and master taster at Brown-Forman. So Elizabeth, welcome to the show, first off and foremost.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. So the first thing I want to ask you is, before we get into just the tasting of Brown-Forman and Brown-Forman products, just give us the history about you. Like, tell us about how you got into this position. How did you get into the job of just tasting bourbon in general?
I would say it was a very lucky journey that got me here. I wasn't necessarily set out to do anything in the alcohol industry. I kind of was just looking for a job that would be something that was interesting and that I found to be, that was just, would push me to learn. And so when I was graduating from my graduate program at the University of Louisville, I got my graduate degree in counseling psychology, and the jobs weren't exciting necessarily. Not that I thought they would be, but I don't know what I thought going into the program. But I was fortunate enough to be at my younger brother's graduation party from high school. He's a lot younger than I am. And there was a man there who heard me talking about needing to find a job. And he said to me, well, we hire psychologists in the lab at Brown-Forman, and it's just a technician job, very entry level. You'll be washing dishes, setting up taste panels, you'll have to recruit panelists. And I was like, oh, sign me up. I was like asking people to come and drink alcohol and then run it like
booze, right?
I mean, I was like, where I sent my resume in, I think that night. Like, I literally was like, this is so cool. Had no idea that a job existed for somebody who had a sensory degree, or not a sensory degree, but a psychology degree, that existed. So I was really excited about that opportunity. And then it just kind of took off from there. I got in, got an interview, and I got in, and I just was like, figured it out. I had no idea what sensory was or what methodology meant with doing sensory testing, so it's all kind of learned within Brown-Forman.
So I guess kind of talk a little bit more about your family history, because I know you had a mother or a grandmother that was also in this kind of thing. So Was it a family influence as well when it came into this?
Yes. So family definitely played a role. My mother was at Seagram's, which is closed, but that was in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. She was at that plant in production and kind of did a role at the production facility there. So it's definitely in my roots in that sense. And then my dad has always been a supporter of the bourbon industry here in Kentucky.
We like it.
I think we all are, right?
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
yeah, so my dad was somebody who was a huge influence. When he found out about this job, it was like he was gung ho, like you got to get this.
So I guess tell us more about your efforts into the brown spirits, right? So because how did you actually get into the point where you said like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna stick my foot in, I'm gonna dabble my feet into the spirit industry. I'm gonna go ahead and just try the thing with Brown-Forman. But like, how'd you get to the point where you are like right now? So I guess give us a little bit more background about that.
I was fortunate enough to get into this industry when bourbon was really taking off. I've been with Brown-Forman now for almost, I guess 7.5 years, a little over that. And 7.5 years ago, bourbon was just starting to really become the bourbon boom that we're in right now. And everyone who knew I worked at Brown-Forman was like, you work at an alcohol company. Well, what's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? And what are these different rules and how is it made? And what are the different grain recipes do? Well, I didn't know. I mean, I was a psychology major. How do I know this stuff? I was still trying to figure out just what sensory method to use. And so I just started doing research. I mean, Brown-Forman is awesome. They have great programs that kind of offers tools to learn, but I started diving in myself. I was fortunate to be on the new whiskey panel and the warehouse panel, which is maturing whiskey. So in my role as a quality control sensory scientist there, I had to learn about those things, and I also pushed myself to learn. And then slowly it just kind of went to the Spirits Academy, which was a program that not everyone can go to at Brown-Forman. It's offered to basically salespeople. And I was, in research and development, it's like, well, you don't really need that. But I wanted to know. I wanted to learn everything. And that was my opportunity. I mean, I knew Chris Morris. He didn't really know who I was. But I went to that program, and that's where I he got to know me. I was helping him set up panels. I asked a million questions. I was that person like constantly raising my hand or having input, and that's where he saw me. And then I was asked if I wanted to train to be master taster. So at that point in time, I had 5 years of experience in the sensory department, so I really had learned a lot, but it was fortunate timing on just kind of the industry and having people around me wanting to know, and then it grew my interest as well.
So let's roll back just a little bit, right? I want to roll back to the point when you said like, I didn't know if this was like the thing I wanted to do or whatever. Like, you said that your mother, or was your grandmother that said that she was in this business as well? Mm-hmm. Like, what really made you say like, like this might be a good opportunity? Like what was the incrementing factor right there?
That's a really good question. I mean, I guess knowing that my mom had done something in the industry like that was it was to have a woman in the 70s to be working amongst a bunch of men that were doing stuff and making calls, and she's ordering people around. She wasn't just like a line worker. I mean, she was managing people, and so that was inspiring. My mom always taught me I never thought there was a job I couldn't do, so I knew I was capable of doing those things, and the alcohol industry is very intriguing, and to do something that your dad also thinks is cool. Like my mom thought it was cool, but my mom also thought Brown-Forman's a great company to work for. So she wanted me there just because she knew her good experiences with Seagram's, and then she wanted that for me. But then it's also to have something that like, I'm going to do something that's cool in kind of the boys only club. At the time, it was very much...
You were blazing your own trail.
It was thought of in that way, but I hate to say that because I know I talk to women all the time who have been drinking bourbon for a very long time. And but I was definitely new to it. It wasn't something I didn't know bourbon was clear when it came off the still. I don't know what I thought it was, but I didn't know that about it. And so, I mean, all of my learning was there, and it just was this drive. I don't know. I just wanted to know.
I think, just to segue on that a little bit is, there's a lot of, one of the growing categories is females drinking whiskey and bourbon in particular. And I think you hit an excellent point there where one of the largest growing categories of people that drinking whiskey is women. Mm-hmm. And you say you didn't know that it came clear off the still. Mm-hmm. And that just goes to show that there's millions of women out there in the United States and probably all over the world that are thinking exactly like you, that want to learn more about the spirit and how it's made in the process. And it's women like you who can really educate and have some commonality with other women, mm-hmm. To bring them into the spirit, maybe away from vodka or away from gin, mm-hmm. or away from maybe clear rum or whatever. So.
Yep, exactly. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to think of yourself as somebody in that light that people
pioneer.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I never really saw myself in that role. I just have been doing something that I've been passionate about, and I've never really been just a girl's girl, I guess. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and they kept me in line, I guess. But it's great seeing women are driving the category. I mean, women are excited, but I know that there are women who've been drinking bourbon for a long time, and there are still people. You talk to just men. I mean, there's such a huge interest right now in bourbon, and everybody's sort of an expert in some regard. They listen to all the podcasts out there. There's so much information that's really great. And so it's fun when you go out to events and you can have conversation with people who, you can still teach them, even if it's like a man, or somebody like my dad who has been a bourbon lover his whole life. And you're like, Dad, did you know this? And he's like, oh, I didn't know that. So it's fun, and it's a great kind of hat to wear, I guess, for me.
Absolutely. And so, one of the things that it almost kind of strikes me, right, is that we've had plenty of master distillers on here, right? We've had Chris on the show before, mm-hmm. and we're always able to get their side of the story. And their side of the story is always that, we've got this whole other side of the industry that, or should I say of our brand, that doesn't get enough recognition. And those are the people that are the tasters. Those are the ones that are on the tasting panel. The ones that really, not just the master distiller, but the ones that are really like making sure the product is consistent, the way it comes out. So I guess kind of give us because you are that person, right? Mm-hmm. You're like one of the first people we had on here that said, we understand that there's this whole other side of who's going to be tasting it, who's going to be judging it, who's going to be able to say, this is not going to be our brand staple. Mm-hmm. So I guess give us some little insight about what that is to be in that sort of position.
Okay. This is where I draw a huge amount of it's my comfort zone. It's my pride. It's where I got my start. So sensory at Brown-Forman, we have 3 different areas, and our sensory panelists are so important to us. I was on the quality side, the kind of the expert side of quality control tasting. So we did a lot of just making sure people knew how to look for any kind of issue, defect that's going on. You weren't doing the romanticized language of the nice toasted oak and caramel, vanilla notes and cherry and all that.
Whatever you read on the label.
Yeah. All those things. So that's a different panel. We do have a panel that I helped start for that. But and we have a research panel that is kind of shelf life testing and also just threshold. I mean, it's very fascinating stuff. And you don't always think of the bourbon industry in this way, that you're using such a strong methodology and statistical analysis of your product to understand it from a human perspective. But at the end of the day, we have our analyticals that we do chemistry. that we run on the product. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't taste good to a person, and if a person can pick it up, it doesn't matter what the instrument says. It matters what a human being says. So on the sensory side that I was on, we have ways to calibrate panelists. So we actually create markers like defective samples. And I traveled to all of our global production facilities to train people on how to pick up marker on these defective samples and how to properly nose and taste our products, not only whiskey, but tequila and our formulated products and up to Finland and all that. So many different places. And it's so fun to know how much quality people put behind their products and how much quality Brown-Forman puts behind their products. So it's like the behind the scenes is these panelists that are highly trained. So they know how to pick up defects. When it comes to our new whiskey, every panel has, it's a very small panel of highly trained panelists, but we want to have a minimum of 5, but we'll kick out a lot of ballots in one day just because we consider it, if somebody doesn't get the marker sample, they're considered defective. Their instrument is broken and they are tossed out of the panel for that day. It's not that they can't come back. And a lot of times our panelists are so competitive about it and care so much. They come back and look at the key and they try to understand why they didn't get whatever the defect was. And it's all spiked things, and it's very rare that we actually see these in a live sample. But it's a way of making sure our panelists are being really diligent, good panelists in their good instruments. And just like any instrument, every day you come into the lab and you calibrate it and you make sure it hits its marks. And if it doesn't, it's not good.
So these people are tasting.
Mm-hmm. Nosing and tasting. Majority of it's nosing, just because you can get so much out of aroma as opposed to taste. But sometimes you'll have to taste.
And is there a list that exists where I can sign up for this? Because
we actually do. We have the Brown-Forman Consumer Advisory Panel.
I would totally sign up for that.
Yeah, we have the Consumer Advisory Panel that is open to everyone to be on, and that's more of research-based panel. It's not this one. This one's closed to a lot of internal Brown-Forman employees who are very close with the products.
So I guess that also just goes into the whole the whole mindset of there is a psyche of there's these people in these white lab coats, and they're
mine has my name on it.
Exactly.
I have 2.
Exactly, right? So give our listeners a bit more about what happens behind that curtain, right? What happens else behind just in regards of just tasting in general. What happens when something is aged in a rick house and it's ready to be tasted? And you know what, we've all been there. We've all tasted something that's maybe straight out of the barrel and we've just taken a sample of it. But what happens when it has to go behind the people that are pushing it to the market? What happens when it goes and says hey, this is going to go to the people that need to decide, is this the barrel that's going to be up to snuff of what else is out there?
It's a good question. We have a lot that goes on. So say, for instance, Woodford Reserve wanted to come out with a new product. It would first come from myself and Chris Morris, kind of the innovation of it.
Number 1 and number 2.
Yes. So we just sit down and we talk about plan, idea, just what are the possibilities, because there's a lot when it comes to whiskey, and the finishes, just grain recipes, you name it, there's a lot. So there's a lot of brainstorming involved. And then say you get that, well, then you got to kind of prototype. You got to think about how do you, if you want to finish something and say some kind of port barrel, well, what is that going to look like with whatever product? And, we have ways of knowing what percentage would be absorbed from the barrel that it's finished in. So say it'll be around 4% or so. You can make a little prototype. You take your Woodford product, whichever family member you want it to be, or maybe it's a new one, and you make that, and then you add 5% or 4% of your port and make it in a little, and you've got a little 100 ml. Well, so then that's another step. So then we all sit down and we taste it, because we want to, first of all, Chris and I say, yeah, this is good. But then we have other people on our team that also are involved to help make sure that they agree, because it's brand and a lot of other people involved to make sure that it still fits what we want Woodford to do. But at the end of the day, it's, ultimately Chris Morris gets to be the one who puts his stamp of approval on it. And then I kind of get to help out and just be cool enough to be alongside him.
We'll just say you're secondary sampling people. Right?
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a time when Chris Morris has said, like, this is awesome, and then you've come back and said, no, this is not. We need to, fall back, hit the drawing board one more time, and then go back again?
There have been times when we've been out in the warehouse sampling barrels and talking about, like, when we're looking at something that may have an issue or whatever, we will taste. And I've disagreed with them on things before and kind of said, I think that this might not be up to our standard, because when you're tasting so many samples, it can happen, your palates, and then he'll come back like, you know what, you're right. I think we should just nix that one. Or, and then in terms of like innovation, not as much. He and I, it's interesting, we've got good palate symmetry. I usually pick up on more of the sweet aromatic notes, but then Chris, he's really good at picking up floral and a lot of the fruity notes. So when we taste, a lot of times it's like, I'll get those, and then he brings in like, well, are you getting this? And I'm like, oh yeah, I can kind of see that. So it's fun in that regard. And he's an amazing person to work with because he's such a kind person, and he'll listen to my ideas, and even if maybe they're not something he totally agrees with, he'll go, okay, I like that, that's good, and we'll go on. But I haven't fully disagreed with them on anything yet. We'll see.
So I think I'm gonna run this like yet again, right? Mm-hmm. So you came from a psychologist kind of background, mm-hmm. and when you were interviewing, they said, a psychologist would be a very good kind of, I guess you say, it fits the bill for what this is, right? So kind of talk about what it means to be a psychologist in a sensory scientist sort of role.
Okay, so the main thing with that is that you're using human beings as your instruments. That is the basis for having psychologists in the sensory department. Everything that a human being touches is all psychology based, if you think about it. When you're thinking of bottle design, like the label, even colors of things, all is influencing a human being to respond in a certain way to a product. And all we are doing, because that's a psychology thing. I mean, that is the study of human beings. People do it in focus groups all the time. We're simply taking human beings and putting methodology behind how they're tasting. So this type of test. So we'll run like a triangle test. You have 3 glasses in front of you. 2 of them are the same. 1 is different. Can people pick out which one's different? And we have a number of people, we'll have 60 panelists or 30 panelists that make sure that we can get a big enough group of people to taste to make sure that it can be a significant result. And we're looking at it from that perspective. How many people picked it out? How many people didn't? How many people were just guessing? And there's a whole statistical analysis that goes on behind doing that so that you can know, is there a significant difference found or not? And sometimes you want one found and sometimes you don't want one found. So that's where the psychology comes in. And I remember being in class thinking, I'll never use these statistics classes because I'm going to just do therapy with people, and then come to find out you use statistics all the time in psychology.
The data never lies, right?
No, it doesn't. And so it kind of dumbs down the sensory, but it's also fascinating at the same time. I find it fascinating.
So I think when we look at this, and you're on a tasting panel, and you're one of the most important people when it comes to actually discerning which brand is going to brand as your tasting product can roll off the Brown-Forman line. What's the most important sense that you can say is this is the most important one? Like I can nose it, I can taste it, I don't know, feel it, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Like I would say I would see it, but I mean, kind of like when you look at brown caramel, it's really hard to say. But so sight of sense isn't always there. But kind of what's the more important sense to you when you look at this?
I would say nosing is your sense of smell, because if you don't have your sense of smell, you don't have your taste either. Taste, when you break it down, is salty, sweet, sour, fatty. That's your sense of taste, and your nose, what you get in smell, and then the combination is your aromatics, and that's so important. So if you don't have your nose, like if I'm sick, and that's a terrible, I've had that where I've gotten like allergies kicking up, and people come out to taste, and you're just like, oh, good thing I know, the flavor wheel. Really, I can kind of get by, because you can get a little bit once you start to taste. It kind of, floods up into your whole olfactory system and all that. But yeah, it's a bummer. And if I lost my sense of smell, I would be out of a job.
It's like your nose is your gatekeeper, right? Mm-hmm. Before you have anything else, you got to have that gatekeeper of your nose to be able to smell all the different aromas that come from that whiskey. And without that, you can't progress further down the line of what a whiskey does for your senses, whether it's taste or finish. You got to have the nose to begin with.
I was about to say, I was like, what happens if you come to the job and you've got a head cold?
Oh, yeah.
You got a sniffle.
You got to call out sick, right?
It does happen where I've had a head cold.
A lot of Nafrin.
A good hot toddy at night.
That's why they have
remedy.
Medicinal whiskey is why they created that.
Exactly.
Is that what it is?
Exactly.
Okay.
But I will definitely. There are days I've been at work and I'm like, sorry, I do have a cold, and it depends on what my job duty is that day. I guess it's like, well, if I'm just coming out and doing kind of the unglamorous, boring part of my job, then it doesn't matter. But if I'm hosting a taste personal selection that day, so we have our Woodford Reserve personal selection program, and people come out, and you want to really give them this great experience, but you just kind of have to let them know, I have a cold, I'm gonna let you lead this, but here's flavor wheel, you can do it. And you just have to own up to it and know that you don't want to lie to people like, sure, oh, here, I'm gonna make this up. But I mean, I can hint to people, well, do you get vanilla notes or do you get cherry? Because I do know Woodford very well. I say I have an intimate relationship with Woodford Reserve, so I can rely on that, my history with the product. But yeah, it's a bummer day. And I mean, I tell you, when it was like a week and a half of a cold, it was kind of scary, because that's what you rely on. And I've heard of people taking medicines and it totally eliminates their sense of smell. And if that were to happen to me, I would be out of a job.
So springtime and fall time are my times for allergies. Mm-hmm. May, April, and then, September, October, August, or whatever. And, I can drink bourbon, but I can't. A lot of times I can't nose it because of the allergies going on. So I would not be in my prime for those months.
And you just have to own it.
Absolutely.
It is what it is.
So that kind of leads into the next question. So Matt Fisher from Facebook asks, he says, so it's super nerdy and specific, but with most bourbon drinkers, using Glencairn glasses at home is pretty much a standard. Mm-hmm. Yet, however, when you go to the distillery, Copita or Capita nosing glasses are pretty much a standard. So why would you use Copita versus Glencairn when you're sitting there tasting on a panel?
I don't know. We use Glencairn here at Woodford Reserve.
Okay.
So I don't know why you'd use another one. I mean, you definitely want a tulip-shaped glass for when you're doing tastings. So yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. You want...
So I guess go into why would you use a tulip-shaped glass?
So you want to use a tulip-shaped glass because the way that it's shaped... it helps to capture a lot of those aromas and kind of focus them towards one area, so towards your nose. If you have just an open glass, like the ones like a rocks glass, those are not, it's just open and it doesn't capture it. So this would be fine if it had a little tulip going in, and it would kind of help centralize those aromas. We actually did a tasting and where we were tasting a bunch of different glass. This might be a little inside secret,
it's okay. Keep going.
Look for a bourbon glass to come out that is ideal for tasting bourbon, and something that all the masters got together and did, and I got to be a part of that. So
cool.
Look for it to come.
I mean, because
2017.
I don't know. I think so. Yeah.
Because when you think
Christmas
about it,
gift.
like it's because I think it was probably like it had to be at least like a year and a half ago, and everybody started buying a lot of those glasses, a lot of those Glencairn glasses, and then all of a sudden people started buying like, oh, I want to get glasses that have stems on them, and then there was the New Orleans glass that came out, and then there was a whole lot of those things that said like. they want to pick different things out of it or whatever it is. But, I'm looking at you and thinking like, okay, so, you're in the sensory department. Like when you're sitting there and you're drinking out of a particular, like, what is the particular glass that you drink out of to say like, this is what we're baselining off of? Like, how do we try to figure out what is the bottom line? Like, what is I wouldn't say bottom line, but what is our baseline to try to figure out like this is how we figure out our 0 and this is where we figure out our 100.
Well, when we did our experimentation with a bunch of different glass types, and we did every type, we did kind of like a fluted, like a champagne type glass. We did stemless, some with stems, all the way to like more of the brandy type of glass. It's really fat and in different types of tops on them. So some of them were tuliped in, some of them kind of came in, but then went out a little bit like a trumpet. So we really went and tried them all and just took notes on what were the different attributes and overall just which one did you prefer the most, and we just whittled it down every single time. And when we're in our sensory lab, we have little they look like little wine glasses. They're little, they look like little tulips, honestly. I mean, they just kind of come together and they're small. That's basically what I think is the best glass to use in terms of just generality across the board. Any kind of product, you just want that tulip shape. We do use watch glasses, so that's a little piece of glass that goes over the top of your glass, and you can swirl in that, and it'll capture any aromas in the headspace, so you can kind of slide it off and get a huge concentration. Yeah, and that's the best. I wish I would have brought some over with me from the lab, but I mean that's really
next time. We'll make it happen next time.
But it makes a big difference when you're trying to pick up on specifics.
Absolutely. So I guess another question I want to ask, because you had started as an associate and you kind of worked your way up. But for anybody else that wants to sit there and try to take the same career path that you did, what does it really take to become a master taster? Kind of talk about that, because I know that we all get into these roles and we're say, oh, we're just lucky. We just lucked into it, and we knew the right people at the right time, and we got it at the right time, whatever it is. But for somebody that wants to get into it today, what's it really take for them to like really succeed?
I won't say that it's luck and right place, right time, even though I think that does play a huge chunk in it, no matter what role you're going into in your career. I mean, having a healthy social network of people, and that's a very important thing. But because I wouldn't have known about the job had I not heard about it. It's just one of those things. I heard about it at the right place. But once I got into the job, I think working hard, I feel like I said yes to a lot of things and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was just like, oh, okay, I'll figure it out. And I always think of myself in the movie The Devil Wears Prada, where you're just handed these tasks and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to complete this, but I'll get it done. And then you just kind of rise to the challenge and you get it done. And then having good managers, I had excellent managers at Brown-Forman in my sensory role, with both, my higher up manager and then my direct report manager. Both were very good at helping me figure out my career path and what I wanted to do and seeing what I was good at. And I would voice my opinion on what I enjoyed doing. And I enjoyed talking to people, and I enjoy learning about bourbon, and I loved getting to travel around and do training. So it all kind of started to fit this, which Brown-Forman, when I first started, didn't even have this role as master taster. It was not even something, I mean, maybe it was in somebody's thought cloud out there, but it wasn't a career or job that you could sign up for and interview for. It was, they saw people that had specific qualities, and I guess I had them. I don't know exactly what Chris Morris was looking for.
I was going to say, so rewind a little bit. Like, talk about what was that specific quality you think that Chris Morris saw in you that wasn't anybody else?
I do think it was my desired not just only Chris knowing this, but other people higher up at the company. I mean, I'm going around and I'm always like, sure, let me get up and talk in front of people. I love doing that. And a lot of this job is getting up in front of large groups of people and talking to them and just being able to...
Welcome to the podcast, by the way.
Yeah. And here I am talking to a whole bunch of people I don't know, and just being comfortable to do that. And so that's a huge chunk of it, because we have brilliant, brilliant people. I work with who I think are some of the best people in the industry here at Brown-Forman and at Woodford Reserve that are brilliant, that know just so much about bourbon and how it's made and quality and just everything, could answer a million questions, probably more than I could, because I'm still learning for sure. But they don't want to be out there and being in this role. So I think that having that desire to want to talk in front of people is another thing. And being likable. You have to be somebody that people want to sit down and talk to. And so I have one of those, I guess, personality defects of just wanting to be liked. So that I think helps. But then I think when I was at that Spirits Academy with Chris Morris, I was speaking up and I was asking a lot of questions, and I literally was the person sitting at the front of the classroom or the front of the bus listening to every word he had to say, because I was like, who gets this opportunity to be with Chris Morris and to learn? And any question I wanted to ask, I had the opportunity to ask it. So I was diligent about that. And so it's just putting yourself out there is a huge chunk of it, and then working really hard. I mean, I didn't know anything about sensory or bourbon, and now I'm here. And so I work hard every day, and I like to be humble about that, but it is true. You have to work really hard to kind of learn things and not always just do it from 9 to 5 when you're in the office. It's out of the office.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease
at
the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
I think also, like you said, I think you're willing to, put yourself out there. You have, when you sign up or are hired for a job, you have specific job responsibilities. Mm-hmm. But make no mistake, somebody's hiring you for, your mind, your productivity, and the ability to do a job. But you're also hiring somebody to be willing to take on roles and responsibilities that may come up that you don't have no idea, and being willing to adjust. Mm-hmm. and be forward thinking to take on things that the company may take on in another year from now. And so they're thinking about that person who can take on that role and responsibility, without regard to failing. Mm-hmm. Be trying, try your hardest, and if you fail, so be it. But at least you're willing to put yourself out there to help yourself grow, but also the company grow. And managers see that, mm-hmm. and they saw that in you. That's why you're here right now. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's very important for a manager to be able to see that person, to bring them and groom them to be where they are today. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's putting in I always like to say this too, that you put in your blood, sweat, and tears. You don't go into it thinking expecting to be at a certain level. I never expected to be where I am today. I just have always been very grateful that I am where I am, and I just keep working hard and never get complacent in where you are and that I'm fine. I mean, it's you put in your blood, sweat, and tears, and you have to work to get to wherever you are. You don't just get handed it because you showed up.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So we're reaching the top of the hour here, maybe the top of the 45-minute mark here. But I want to leave with two thoughts here, because you had a very good. I watched your presentation on change. Mm-hmm. I did watch it, and you had towards the end, you kind of talked about how everybody needs to just drink what they like. It doesn't matter if you mix it with Coke, or you mix it with ginger ale, you just drink it on the street, or you drink it with rocks. So I want you to talk about the psyche of why people mix their bourbon with Coke, because I think when you talked it on there, I was profound, because when I was in college, that's what I mean. I just drink bourbon with Coke, that's just what everybody did, right? Yeah. But I never had any psyche behind it, so kind of talk about that.
Okay, well, this is going to be my personal. I've never done any research on this, but people. First of all, Coke was it complements bourbon so well, no matter which product you're drinking. There's so many great things that go on in a glass of bourbon. And there's a lot of really interesting things that go on in a Coca-Cola. So there's clove notes, there's citrus notes, which are all found in bourbon. There's vanillas and caramels. So those match really well. So you've got that natural that they just fit well together. But I like to think of it when drinking beer. I like to kind of compare like that. So when you first started drinking beer, I'm sure most people started out drinking Natty Light or Miller Light or, every
Natty Light for sure.
Watered down.
UK Life right over here. Yes.
Absolutely.
Exactly. I mean, everybody had boxes of that all around their college houses. And so you didn't start out drinking the ultra craft beers that are like, take a minute to really, it takes you like an hour to drink through them sometimes because they're so loaded with different flavors or extremely hoppy or whatever it may be. Just like a glass of bourbon. I mean, you can start out with your bottom shelf, which we probably did because pocketbooks are not quite what they are when you get older. But it's an easy way, they're both brown. So color plays a role in that. Because when I saw people mixing bourbon or their whiskey with like Sprite, I thought that was weird, and now I understand why. But the color.
Wait a minute, hold on. Rewind. Why?
Well, I thought it was weird because Sprite is clear, and why would you put a brown product in that? That's gross. But I now am a huge fan of bourbon and lemonade and
why?
Citrus.
Keep going. I want to hear why.
Citrus is so good with bourbon.
There we go.
Citrus is amazing with bourbon. You can use your orange peel or a lemon. Just bourbon on the rocks with lemon is so refreshing on a hot summer day. It just adds a little something to it. So I love that. So citrus is a great pairing with bourbon. But getting back to the Coke thing, I think it's just a baby step. It's a way to get people, introduce them, because a lot of times the first time you pick up a glass of bourbon, it's like, whoa, it's an acquired taste in a lot of ways just because it's high proof and you want to cut the proof down. And so it's a very easy way to drink bourbon when you're new to the bourbon category.
I think on that is when you're young and in college or maybe after college and you're partying with your friends and you drink bourbon, you want to extend your drinking shelf life that evening or that night for a long period of time. And if you have a shot or two of bourbon, at least for me, I'm toasty after about a shot. Mm-hmm. But if you cut it down with Coke, or in my case, I grew up on Woodford and ginger ale.
Yeah,
that was my drink. Woodford and ginger ale or Ale 8-1.
Yeah, awesome.
But you had to extend your drinking life for a few hours, and the way to do that was either with water or Coke or ginger ale. In my case, was ginger ale to be able to start drinking around 8 o'clock at night
and still make it
and still be okay.
By 4 a.m.
Now you can Uber it, but call a friend to drive you home. But still, you could extend your drinking evening a little bit because you could cut it with something kind of sweet and
and adding sugar. No matter, we've done tons of blind studies and asked people what they prefer. People always prefer a little sugar in their whiskey or bourbon, always. And they, if you ask them outright, they're going to say, no, I like it just neat, plain. But when they're blind and they think they're just tasting a regular bourbon, whenever it's got a little sweetener in it, people like it. They prefer it.
Everybody loves cavities at the end of the day.
They do. Everybody loves sweetness. Come on. So it makes it more palatable always.
So we're going to wrap this up, and I just wanted to just kind of give a plug to you because I know you're very much a philanthropist, right? So kind of talk about what you do outside of bourbon as well.
Outside of bourbon, I'm on the board for Green Hill Therapy. So I ride horses, and that's near and dear to my heart. So Green Hill Therapy is the combination of horses and children. So I get to work with kids that go out and ride horses, not only for what they think is fun, but they're actually getting a lot of physical and occupational therapy out of it. And these are kids that have physical ailments as well as sensory type issues or on the autism spectrum. So it's a good combination for me. So I spend a lot of time with Green Hill outside of here. So, yeah.
Well, awesome. Elizabeth, I want to say thank you for joining us on the show today. Lyndon, thank you for co-hosting
Absolutely. Thank
today.
you.
Yeah, thank
This is
you.
fantastic. Anybody that if you want to get in contact with us, actually, if you want to get in contact with Elizabeth, how do they get in contact with you? Whether it's on Twitter or Facebook, like how do they want to know more about you?
Okay. They can find me on Facebook or on Instagram, just under my name, Elizabeth McCall. And then, email is elizabethmccall at bf.com.
There you go. And if you want to follow more about Bourbon Pursuit, you can do that on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Bourbon Pursuit. You can also, if you like what you hear, make sure you sponsor the show. It's Bourbon Pursuit, at patreon.com/Bourbon Pursuit. And if you have any suggestions for guests or anything else that you want to hear on the show, make sure you send us an email. That's theduo, THEDUO at thebourbonpursuit.com. And with that, we will see you all next week. This podcast of Bourbon Pursuit is in partnership with thewhiskeywash.com, a lifestyle website for news and reviews for people who like whiskey, and for those who think a life without whiskey has no style, thewhiskeywash.com.